Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's dialogue, where we are exploring process of making in craft and architecture in relation to tradition. I'm Eleena Jamil, an architect based in Malaysia, and today's dialogue forms part of the About Making project, led by myself and partners in the UK, comprising of Dr. Stephen Knott, who is here today, and Dr. Christophe Luder and Abby Fletcher. And this project is supported by British Council's Connections Through Culture Grant 2021. Before we start the dialogue, I would like to introduce Florence Lambert, who is here to say a few words. Florence is the Director of Arts and Creative Industries from British Council Malaysia, and she and her team have been wonderful in supporting us in our About Making project. So I would like to invite Florence, please, to the virtual floor.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Florence Lambert, and I'm the Head of Arts and Creative Industries at the British Council Malaysia. So I would like to thank Eleena Jamil and her team who worked on this project and congratulate them for what is so far one of my favorite Connection Through Culture projects. I met Eleena 3 years ago when we were working together on our Crafting Future program here in Malaysia. Already then, I could see her commitment, and I really liked her holistic approach towards craft, design, making, culture, and sustainability. To me, About Making is not just about compiling or sharing the various processes and experiences of makers and designers around the world. At the core of this project, I see how Eleena and her team are able to extract and share the wisdom behind making. The wisdom of our ancestors who knew to listen to nature and customs. The wisdoms of the innovator who makes not to satisfy greed, but to find solution to climate change and consumerism. The wisdom that comes from collaborating with cross-disciplinary communities and learning from a diverse range of professionals, experiences, cultures, and ways of making. Today, there is a lot of information and knowledge out there, but too often little wisdom. Personally, I think that this project is classroom material. Teachers in design, architecture, and craft schools should share with the kids how to extract the wisdom behind making. I am proud to support projects like this one. And Eleena, I thank you for making us a little wiser today. With that said, I look forward to the upcoming dialogue, and I wish you all a great rest of the event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Florence. So before I pass the session over to the speakers, I would like to provide a little context to today's dialogue, which is the first in a series of 3. So I would like to share a little presentation. The dialogues serve as a responses to a series of interviews which we have produced in the last 3 months working on this project. These interviews explore different aspects of making in architecture and sustainable solutions by speaking to traditional craftspersons in Malaysia and practitioners in Southeast Asia as well as the United Kingdom. The interview with the traditional craftspersons in Malaysia is a film titled Tukang and foregrounds the explorations of our project. Tukang is a generic Malay word for someone who is skilled in any art of making, but in the context of our project, it means craftspersons who is skilled in the building techniques of the traditional timber house found in Malaysia with slight variations throughout Southeast Asia. Academics and architects often laud and equate these timber houses with ideal sustainable model for the tropics. But one element that is often missing from the conversation is the role of the craftsperson, or the tukang, and their processes in the creation of this rich architectural tradition. Traditionally, a house tukang was fully responsible for the design and built from start to completion. He is a passionate master builder working with a team of apprentices. He is a skillful carver, fully understands aesthetics. He has a deep knowledge of materials and knows where to source them. He's a ritual leader working within a highly ordered process within the framework of geomancy and religion. He's also seen as a community leader working closely with the community. So exploring these roles and processes in the film has in many ways shifted the focus away from the finished creation, i.e. the house, to the act of making. Making is seen beyond matters of technicality and practicality. It is seen as a value, an ethos, an obligation that has been practiced in our diverse traditions as a driving factor to achieve excellence. These values, I feel, are important to understand in the making of contemporary architecture and looking for sustainable solutions. We found them present in the work of people we interviewed, who are Shoemaker from Thailand, Shao architects from Indonesia, and in the UK we found them in the work of One-to-One Collective, Notpla, and also Amin Taha. And these interviews show that there are many ways of practicing the values. So today, we would very much like to hear views from two more people. We have Martina Margetts from the UK and Andy Rahman from Indonesia. I will firstly introduce the speakers. Martina Margetts is an authority on the culture and practice of contemporary craft. She has taught across 3 decades at the Royal College of Art and was for 9 years editor of Crafts. She has curated major exhibitions for the Crafts Council, British Council, Design Museum and the Barbican Art Gallery, and her books included International Crafts, Michael Rowe and Tord Boontje, alongside numerous essays in museum catalogues and craft anthologies, including the forthcoming Post-Craft Towards New Economies of Making. Andyrahman from Indonesia is the principal as well as the founder of Andyrahman Architects with his partner Abdi Manaf since 2006. His practice was established after he completed his studies at the Institut Teknologi Sepuluh November in Surabaya, Indonesia. His practice of architecture revolves around craftsmanship that explores local materials, local techniques, corresponding closely with the craftsman as the executor. And lastly, we have Stephen Knott, who is a member of the About Making project team, who will be chairing the Q&A session. Stephen is a writer, researcher, and lecturer in craft theory and history. He lectures at Kingston University, is author of Amateur Craft, History and Theory, and articles relating to craft history and theory. He's also one of the editors of the Journal of Modern Craft. So that's the end of the introductions. Without further ado, I would like to invite Martina Margetts, firstly, to share her views on the theme of our dialogue today. Over to you, Martina.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Hello, everybody, and I'm very pleased. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very pleased to be part of this discussion. 3 words have already been mentioned: wisdom, values, and sustainability. And I think these are very significant when we're thinking about contemporary craft, but also thinking from a traditional perspective. And here I just want to show which part of the world we're in, and this idea that this is a group of nation states in a post-colonial world, and that Southeast Asia is only static on the map, and the idea that these are countries that are developing very distinctive identities, very distinctive futures in terms of society and economy and belief systems and culture, but that there is this shared underlying traditional craft that is being sustained in various ways but threatened in others. The project that we were part of 5 years ago, run by the British Council in partnership with the Royal College of Art, was in Thailand, Myanmar and Vietnam, and it focused on textiles. But I hope that as we go through the images, you'll see a tremendous synergy and communality of concerns between the different craft disciplines and practices, between the idea of clothing for the body and in our homes and architecture that surrounds us. and it involved 12 researchers, 6 from the Royal College of Art, and then professional researchers from museums, universities, and organizations in the 3 countries who joined up. So there were 4 people in each country, and the aim was to look in detail at craft knowledge as it appeared within textile communities, and to think about how to foster the development, how to foster knowledge exchange, and how to really focus on sustainability, but looking at the problems and challenges that arise. This is just a group of the researchers, and you can see their interconnections already with, for example, on the left, a Vietnamese Hmong tribe weaver, and it's important to look at the beauty of her embroidered sleeves, and you'll see more in a second about how all that was made. The exhibition at the Aram Gallery was in London, and this is just some shots from it. And I curated the exhibition, but I was drawing on the 80 works of textile and the raw materials and the tools that were brought back by the researchers to the UK, and also to try to analyze in detail, for example, ICAT here, how the techniques prevailed, still were being sustained, what the patterning was, what the general significance in cultural terms of the various crafts, particularly batik and weaving and embroidery. And this is just a general installation shot, and it was divided into 3 parts: craftsmanship, community, and commerce. And they paid attention to these different areas. But as I put, craft is integral to social, economic, and cultural value, as well as values. And one of the quotes from a student was, "Now I've actually been to a lot of communities, I begin to see a much bigger picture." And I think it is this sort of integration, seeing craft as a kind of cornerstone of societies, and how they operate, and how they think, and how they make. But actually, we need to see as big a picture as possible by these cultural exchanges that the British Council supports, but also by building knowledge and an interchange between the contemporary urban world and the rural traditional, because it's often that dichotomy. But I want to try and show that there is the development of a kind of synthesis going on. So there was a film here on the left, starting with an image of Hanoi, and the seats were from the streets in Hanoi that were brought back, those sort of plastic seating that you see everywhere in that city. The other word that's already been mentioned is sustainability, but I want to focus particularly on this idea of a way of life, because I think all craft is only of significance, and always of significance, because it is integral to the particular ways of life we want to pursue in the world. And there are choices, but they're often contingent on particular challenges that exist. So whilst on the left, the prayer flag, Buddhist prayer flag in temples, hand woven, it takes weeks and weeks to make, that particular understanding and insight, those who are not part of that community, like me, for instance, have to work hard to understand the meanings, the origins, the context of that. And I think this idea of a kind of shared dialogue about identity and the understandings of ways of life and the choices we make about what we want to sustain, because on the right is a detail of a Chinese import into Southeast Asia of a polyester. It's a detail of a skirt, it's polyester, so it's synthetic, it's machine made, you can see the machine stitching, it's not hand embroidered, it's printed on, the embroidery is printed on. So the dilemmas of the necessary economies of how the world works intersects with this possibly idealized sense of a sustainable tradition of craft practice. So I want to just show one sequence to indicate the sheer skill and time that is taken to produce the woven cloth in Vietnam. And I put here this, my thinking about traditional craft embodies knowledge, skill, teamwork, time, care and feeling, natural resources, locality, sense of place, cultural meaning, and way of life. And this, as I showed already, indicated, is Jia, who's one of the Hmong tribe. And the focus in the next sequence of slides, which I'll just go through very quickly for reasons of time, will indicate the year-long cycle that in this particular locality, all the women, and this is very much a gendered talk, women are fundamental as makers, that the women pursue. So this is just her with the woven hemp. It's made of hemp. So we'll go very quickly through this. This is 1 year cycle. So the seeds, the hemp fields put to good use, the harvesting the hemp, spinning the hemp yarn, washing the spun hemp in the river. And the two of these very long strands of hemp washing in the river. Then it's all indigo dyed, and the effects over the years shown in this hand of a woman. Then the weaving the hemp cloth, then burnishing it, calendaring it, a particular technique to bring up the shine on the hemp. And you can see them wearing these. These are everyday clothes for them. So they're making them partly for themselves, but increasingly also for collectors and tourists. But this is obviously at the very high exclusive end of making, and then the burnished hemp. The challenges to this particular way of life that appears very holistic, and it could be romanticized. It has indeed been romanticized frequently. Traditional craft often is, but it shows the reality of a link to place and the time it takes. And these are the challenges in terms of materials, environment, technology, commerce, tourism, and education. And very briefly, I'm illustrating these. So the natural dyes from local materials, from fruits, from the bark of trees, and so on. Here's a selection in Thailand. Increasingly, there's chemical dyeing. There is pollution from the dyeing, from the chemical dyes, but for other areas of pollution as well, which is affecting the quality of grown raw materials. This is the beautiful lotus plant from which lotus fibers are made to spin for lotus weaving in Myanmar. And you can see the weaving sheds in the background, so that is under threat from pollution. And for the architects amongst you, I put in their beautiful weaving workshops, the traditional ones on stilts. Raw materials, there's a tremendous problem about silk weaving in Thailand, and of course Thai silk is world famous, so that sericulture is under threat. And this is the fantastic silk work, the traditional slightly faded poster behind a retailer in Myanmar, and the tremendous complexity of weaving that takes place. And this is an example of it with 100 shuttles that you can see beneath the hands of the weavers, and it takes a month for the two of them to do the weaving. And you can see that the women have the traditional ground bark paste on their cheeks. And so again, this insight we must have about the patterning of craft, but also that's part of the rituals and belief systems of ways of life in Southeast Asia, and the challenge there, of course, with increasing computer-based production. Again, community enterprise, the small-scale businesses are conflicting with the large-scale industrial. These are the researchers in Myanmar in one of the factories there, which is obviously scaling up industrially. And then, of course, the dilemmas of tourism. It goes back to those imported Chinese skirts. Everything in this picture is imported, so to a degree, fake craft. And then, of course, education. Very limited literacy is a problem all over Southeast Asia amongst the traditional farming communities, weaving communities, craft communities of all kinds, and the opportunities for significant educational design input, technological expertise. But I want to be hopeful about a kind of synthesis of contemporary tradition, the idea that the rural handmade is balanced by the idea of the urban and the machine made and a vast synthetic kind of world. That I think there are ways in which, as the films in the About Making series that Emil and the others have been involved in, that I think the future has to take account of the realities of the way the world is developing, whilst recognizing this idea of the wisdom that is inherent in traditional craft, and to try to broaden our cultural understandings in order to further a new kind of synthesis in craft. So we've got an image of Hanoi as the urban world, and we've got Gia in the Hmong tribe in rural Vietnam. But how do you bring them together? And Tao Vu, who runs Kilnet 109, a fashion company, this jacket is using the hemp, the calendared burnished hemp that is woven by people like Gia, and she's running a very successful fashion collection that uses always just the traditional craft materials. And similarly, this kind of contemporary fashion for freedom idea of using traditional techniques in a contemporary way. And a lot of acknowledgement amongst younger fashion designers, younger researchers who want to acknowledge the traditions, these extraordinary, for example, Chin women of Burma, one of the 135 ethnic groups in Myanmar who are challenged for all sorts of reasons, as we know, sadly, a lot to do with politics and religion on a daily basis for their existence. And this Anna Biak is one of the people working very actively with those communities to develop not only the traditional work and to sustain it, but to actually think about new designs as well. And again, Lisa Fontang is another designer who is drawing on the traditions of Myanmar ethnic groups in order to fashion new collections. And the Buddhist monks' clothing is being adapted in haute couture, and there are also a lot of men getting involved now in contemporary practice, and this is well-known artist Jakai Siributa, embroidering in his studio in Bangkok, and his very challenging political installations in the fine art world. So to close, just to say, as Sandra Sordini, who's one of the students who went on the research visit from which the exhibition was derived. So craft doesn't mean going back to pre-industrial ways of life. It opens up new possibilities for a post-industrial age. Thank you.
Thank you, Martina, for that very insightful presentation. Next, I would like to invite Andy Rahman to give his presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Eleena Jamil. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Eleena Jamil, for inviting me to this event. It is an honor for me to share about our craftsmanship practice. Actually, Indonesia and Malaysia have like same term about craftsman, it's tukang. So I will share about a little bit our practice. This is our country, Indonesia. We have many sorts of traditional houses, around 300 houses. We have a craftsmanship tradition dating back thousands of years. Each region has unique craftsmanship tradition so that each region can produce different architectural works. Our architecture is very close to craftsmanship and local materials. We also have a tradition to build with stone materials. These are the two largest temples in Indonesia which were built with stone. Borobudur temple is the largest Buddhist temple in the world. We have a tradition to build with stone material. These are the two largest temples in Indonesia which were built with stone. Borobudur temple, the largest Buddhist temple in the world, while the Prambanan temple in the 7th century became the first silage building in the Southeast Asia. And our ancestors built these two temples without cement. Next. Not only the tradition to build a building with stone, we also have an amazing brick architectural tradition, especially in East Java, where our studio is located. In East Java, there are dozens of temples that are made of bricks. These are some remains of temples that have been built with bricks since the 14th century in the era Majapahit Kingdom and still standing until now. The center of Majapahit Kingdom is in Trawulan, about 1 hour from our office. Next. We are interested in learning all of that. We learned from our ancestors how to honor local materials. Next. And in 2014, we start researching brick architecture in Trawulan. We learned about tectonics, the properties of materials, and how to develop them in the modern way. Next. We also interested in the building culture that our ancestors did. That what's interesting about our building tradition is the spirit of cooperation that we usually call gotong royong. With local materials, we work together to produce a masterpiece. Next. We work hard and effort to as joint works. There is no one-man show. But unfortunately, all of that is now hard to find. The craftsmanship tradition that we have is slowly disappearing. That's what made us call to preserve it, of course, in our way. Next. Gradually, we learn and try to implement in our project after 2014. One by one, our projects. We developed that craftsmanship tradition in our own way, which we deem appropriate to current circumstances. Next. And today I'll share one of our projects, a little story about how we practice with craftsmanship and local material approach, especially brick materials. This project is called Omah Boto. Omah Boto means brick house. It's located in the center of Sidoarjo city. Next. When we start this design from our analysis, I found something interesting. The location of the project close to the Pari Temple and Sumur Temple, which both have very interesting tectonic of bricks. These temples are located nearby and were built in the 14th century. It is only 4 kilometers from Omah Boto and the temples. Next. These are Pari Temple and Sumur Temple, which were built 700 years ago during the Majapahit Kingdom era. Even so, the techniques of tension and tectonics detail are very sophisticated. This temple uplifted my spirit to work and explore more in the brick craftsmanship and applied them in Omaboto projects. Next. Regarding this brick, we can see that Omaboto, Pari and Sumur temples and Trowulan, the center of the Majapahit kingdom, were in line just 20 kilometers from the site. Next. And this is the floor plan of Omaboto. When you look at this floor plan, the room arrangement was based on Japanese house. We tried to vertically translate the connection between spaces with consideration of wider communal space, more open and accessible from lower level, followed by semi-private on the second floor and the private rooms on the third floor. And this skin building was designed transformed from Japanese house wall. It's called gedek or woven bamboo wall, and implement into the brick arrangements. This type of wall is perfect for tropics. Next. This is the genesis of how Omaboto was made. Local bricks becomes the DNA of whole house. The module size of a brick determines all of these house elements' dimension, even the doors, windows, height of space, fence, and others. This is the reason why it's called Omaboto or brick house. We use MR8 brick, local bricks from East Java, one of the best quality bricks in Indonesia, which is produced by local people in Trowulan. This brick is very unique because it doesn't break when drilled or cut into pieces. Next. These are the 13 bricks tectonics applied in Omaboto that were inspired by Pari Temple and the Sumur Temple. This color coding image is how we communicate with our craftsmen. With this color coding, our craftsmen will understand what. Next. And this is the result. Next. If we took a look at the key plan, this is where the 13 tectonics were applied in Omaboto. Next. The techniques of bricks arrangement also embody some of Indonesia's batik pattern. Batik is a method originally used in Java to produce colored design with beautiful nature-inspired patterns on textiles by dyeing them, having wax applied first to the parts to be left undyed. This is the owner's desires to make his house have strong Indonesian character. So we added other elements to support the Javanese architecture's character. We always involved local materials craftsmen in our projects so that they remain sustainable. Next. This is what ingenuity craftsmanship is. This is the way we work. Our craftsmen are positioned as partners, not subordinates. According to Richard Sennett in the craftsmanship was signified by a commitment to do something at best. It means that craftsmanship is not only limited to handwork. In line with Richard Sennett, Reinor Starchan-Chun argues that craftsmanship should be understood as attitude, as way of thinking and doing, as way of life. It is about fully engaging our heads, hands, and hearts in our labor. And that's what we do in this project, just like our ancestors did. Next. This is the brick walls making process. Next. If we give full trust to our craftsmen, then they can realize our ideas very well. Next. And this is Omaboto or brick house. The house has been built with craftsmanship, and I give the black number code based on the 13 types of brick tectonics in this house. Next. The front fence of main entrance. Next. Grid by the encounter of vertical garden and natural materials and hollow bricks that went up to the terrace. It makes a shady and nice ambience when arrive at home. Next. This ethnic terrace is on the second floor, relaxing in a modern Japanese ambience, which also serves a suitable living room during this pandemic. Next. Playful tectonics becomes a background as the sign of different activity zones. Next. From another angle, it was shown the playful combination between bricks, woods, woven bamboo, old tiles, and gebyok. It creates a harmony between the past and modern days. Next. The lounge is located right on the west side of the house on the third floor. Next. Tectonics on the building's facade is able to create the fourth dimension, where the sunlight gets into the rooms as well as becoming a time marker. Next. Master bedroom is on the top floor. Next. Backdrop is the six tectonics with the wood, furniture, and batik pattern as the beddings. Next. This is the bathroom. Next. The Ablution Space shows how we handle the rainwater problem to get into the building. We create 120 centimeters space from the facade full of the river stones. It creates space that accommodates the rainwater while we can enjoy it like we are on the side of the river. Next. This is the prayer room. The floors, walls, and ceilings are all made of bricks. Next. This backdrop is of communal space in the first floor, was made of residual bricks. Next. From this building process, there are 10% of waste bricks, and that 10% waste bricks was arranged into a tectonic wall, and the result becomes the main point of view, this communal space. So in this process, building this house, we didn't throw any bricks at all. Next. This is a photo by my client, sent by my client when he held a recitation event at his home. In his message along with this photo, he thanks me for creating a communal space for him so that he can hold many activities at home. And if we see in this picture, you can see that the backdrop that we made from waste bricks of this project. Next. And in addition to exploring local bricks, we also develop non-burnt custom brick from various environmentally friendly materials. Collaboration with local material craftsmen, such as laterite soils, fly ash, bottom ash, plastic, perlite, terracotta waste, and many more, as a form of our concern for the environment. Next. And this is the example, Lego bricks from laterite soil. Laterite is type of infertile soil. So if we use this type of soil, it means that we don't destroy the surface soil, which actually still can be used for farming, absorbing water, etc. And laterite soil is one of the abundant match soil in our land. These types of bricks ensures two environment issues at once: the image of soil surface and carbon footprint. Next. While this is a brick made from terracotta waste, we grind the waste and then press it to make bricks. The process making it without burning. Next. And this is the sum of our works that use bricks from environmentally friendly materials and waste. Some are still under construction. Next. That's all can I share. Hopefully it's useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Andyrahman, for the presentation of the beautiful Rumah photo. Now I would like to pass the floor to Dr. Stephen Knott to chair the question and answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eleena, and hello to everyone. And thank you very much, Andy and Martina, for those fantastic talks. The first one, which is very much kind of relevant to what we've been discussing so far, is this notion of the kind of wisdom of makers, the knowledges that lots of people are trying to access, architects, researchers. I wanted to really focus in on that knowledge and how to access it and the issues relating to that. So my question is, like, quite simply, how can researchers learn from craftspeople, and what kind of difficulties or obstructions to progress occur in this area from your different experiences, I suppose? So it's like, how can this knowledge, which is so embedded in an individual and in a community, be accessed by outsiders often? Have you got any thoughts about that question?
Yeah, shall I comment?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, this was very much at the heart of the research project that we were involved in a few years ago, because the language, of course, just verbal communication is a huge stumbling block. That if you're going into rural communities and you're trying to access their knowledge, communicating that, then not necessarily they have the knowledge, but it's not always straightforward how it's going to be communicated. And so I think this idea of documenting as much as possible, so that it isn't reinventing the wheel all the time, that communities aren't visited again and again, that there is actually a build-up of proper documentation, recording what they're saying, rather like, very interestingly, you're about making films, you know, that they're documenting thought, they're subtitled, so that there is a communication across language. That seems to me incredibly important. The other is for full engagement of museums and universities as research organizations to try to, again, build up collections, build up study collections, for universities to build up archives, research archives, and for organizations, of which there are many. The British Council is obviously engaged on the ground, but with many national organizations in these countries, and it's for them to be able to build effective partnerships whereby the knowledge can be formed into kind of, which has been done in the last few years with sort of toolkits, and generally be able to document both the processes, but think about raw materials and how those are preserved and sourced and so on.
Andy, yes. How have you found in your practice the communication with craftspeople? You talked about them being, not subordinates but collaborators and integral. How do you make sure that communication is really productive and works both ways?
Yes, actually, in architecture, we have problems. Mostly, we have not close with our craftsmen, so we very exclusive, and I think it's not good for us, because actually both of architect of craftsmen is similar. And in 2014, I tried to think different way. I make craftsmen become my partners. I listen to them, what they think about the materials. And actually, the craftsmen is more know about materials than architect, because every day they play with the materials every day. They know very well the characters of the materials, and that is make my new perspective about, actually we have very good skilled craftsmen, and how if I involve them become not only in the behind of the screen, but they are the player. They are the important thing in our project, and our project one by one is so that, and I think and I wrote a book to trying to share my perspective to the other architects in Indonesia, because our culture, Indonesian architect, is mostly exclusive and have they didn't understand the craftsmen. And I think that's our my experience about how to learn with craftsmen.
Yeah, I mean the what you said there about Indonesian architects sort of being a kind of group by themselves, not kind of relating to building craft so much, or the craftsmanship of builders, is certainly something that looking back in the history of the arts and crafts movement, where in the UK a lot of the UK architects, sorry, the UK figureheads of the arts and crafts movement were architects that advocated a close connection between all these building crafts, in opposition to the kind of sort of society of the day. So it's a kind of this idea of architects being kind of amongst themselves, not talking to all the other allied crafts, is a kind of one that plays across cultures. But I want to go to the meeting chat here, because it kind of follows up on the Omar Botto project there, and it's from Christoph, who's a collaborator on that project, Christoph Luder. So thanks for that. So I'll just read out the chat rather than try and summarize it and make lots of mistakes. So thank you very much, Andy and Martina, for fascinating presentations and sharing perspectives from Southeast Asia and the UK. And I think his questions mainly to you, Andy. It's for Christoph. He says, it feels to me that Omar Botto uses brick in textile ways as a woven fabric, enclosing space across floors, porous walls and screens, creating beautiful and deeply evocative spaces and atmosphere. I found the prayer room particularly resonant, seated inhabitants in physical touch with the floor materials as one is with a piece of clothing. I'm interested in how Omar Botto is inhabited. Are there other examples throughout the house, similar to the prayer room, of furnishings and situations that are unique to culture and traditions? So Andy, can you answer that question from Christoph?
You can repeat, please?
Yes, certainly. The main question, apart from the celebration, is this idea of, are there other parts of the building that are inhabited that have that are similar to the prayer room in terms of the furnishing and situations that are unique to the culture and traditions of that region or space?
Yeah, actually, the prayer room of Omar Botto is have philosophy similar with Garbhagraha in the temples of Hindu temple in Javanese tradition. So Garbhagraha is a symbol of the origin of human from mother's womb, like that. And prayer in the prayer room of Omar Botto has similar philosophy. Is from if you can see in the prayer room of Omar Botto, is the floor, wall, and ceiling is from bricks. In Muslim belief, people from soil and bricks from soil too. So when my client praying and at that room, he always remember from the origin of the human. When he praying, he always saw soil in the floor, in the wall, and in the ceiling. So that's the point. And why the ceiling of the prayer room use brick? I want to show to the people that we have very unique bricks. very unique bricks from the formula of the soil, unique soil from Majapahit, from the Trawulan in East Java, because the formula of the soil is make very good quality of bricks. I want to try to remind that to the people. We have very good materials actually until today. That's the brick from Trawulan, and we have very good, very skillful craftsmen, and because and our ancestor can make temple from brick without cement, and it's like a structure from bricks, very beautiful, very clever, and I try to show that if our craftsmen has that DNA of our ancestor.
Yeah, the project has got some resonances with the contemporary artist Theaster Gates, who's kind of also talked in a very different context about the kind of the soul of bricks, and he kind of had this art project where he kind of got people making bricks as in this kind of to really draw out the kind of spirit of it. But I wanted to go to a question that Florence has raised on the chat there about how craft education could play a role in knowledge transfer. And Martina, obviously at the Royal College of Art, been employed there for a number of years. And I wondered, from the project on the line, what impact did it have on the educational context, both of the people involved, but maybe on the kind of broader, within the Royal College or within education? Was there some good translations or parallels there?
Yeah, I think obviously on those who took part, it had a sort of seminal effect and an enduring effect. But I think more broadly, the East, sort of going back a bit, the kind of East-West divide of the world, which now in a post-colonial setting we're viewing very differently. But there was that notion that somehow Southeast Asia was a kind of exotic other. And in being other, it was also seen as traditional, as a kind of undeveloped part of the world. I mean, this all gets into the sort of geopolitics. But I think in terms of education, there's been just a global transformation of not only how we all see each other in the world, but therefore how we view what all of us are making. And we look more and more at the shared, what the former critic Peter Fuller called the shared symbolic order. We can kind of see commonalities as well as tremendous differences of cultural meanings and patternings and symbolisms and forms. But there is a sort of shared knowledge. And I think that's where education is championing a much more holistic vision of creative practice. And we know that in the art world. I mean, there's been a complete change in what is exhibited in our museums and galleries and which artists and craftspeople have come to prominence. And I think also that idea of the unknown craftsman, which Grayson Perry, of course, with his British Museum exhibition, was highlighting the anonymity of spectacularly interesting craft practice. That idea of anonymity is not now conflated with marginality and insignificance. We now know that a lot of anonymous work is of enormous significance. And final comment, just connecting it with architecture, thinking about Bernard Rudowski's book, which is now nearly 60 years old, Architecture Without Architects. Most of that is, in a sense, anonymously created, but it's far more original and astonishing and varied and diverse in terms of its thinking than, say, high modernism, which prevailed for a century, particularly in its forms that became repetitive and ultimately debased. So I think education is playing an enormous role in all the revisionist thinking that's necessary to understand the the full complexity and meaning and after all wisdom that is in craft.
And as a follow-up question, what role do you think that sort of craft advocacy bodies need to take or have taken in again the same question of accessing this wisdom with these insights? Is there what kind of role? Because a lot of what we've talked about today are innovative individual designer makers, sometimes architects. Is there what role do you see being played by regional craft support bodies or advocacy groups?
I think it's a lot to do with translating the language from talking about individuals and sort of the idea of kind of stars to picking up on what we experienced in Southeast Asia, which is communities. And there is more of an emphasis in the UK and I think probably in the region we're talking about of the idea of communal, collaborative, an emphasis on process rather than product. And this is going into an experience in communities, obviously to do with well-being. There's tremendous connection with that. But I think the questioning of how expertise in terms of know-how of craft practice can be shared and transferred and to generate sort of collaborative and communal experience. And that's something that I think organizations can kind of focus on as a sort of grassroots, bottom-up way of thinking about everyone feeling they've got a stake in understanding, because it's by doing that you understand. And I think craft, of course, being a tacit experience, you have to learn by doing. So that's one way.
And Andy, is there any kind of craft advocacy in East Java that kind of promotes the use of the local materials there? Or how have you established that? Is it directly with the craftspeople in that area? Or is there intermediaries and bodies that help?
Oh, you like how I communicate with the craftsmen?
Yeah, how were you supported in any way by local government or regional bodies in your establishing of this relationship with craftspeople and the makers of bricks in East Java?
Oh, mostly my project is like private projects. So the government project is different project because they have like role, but it's not support the craftsmanship tradition. So we cannot apply the craftsmanship in the government projects because our government didn't support that. So that's why my planning is we design the private projects because we can preserve our tradition. We can collaborate with our craftsmen. We learn together with our craftsmen and we're trying to find how the best way to communicate between architects and craftsmen. And that's all of the methods if the government didn't know about that, and that is one of our like struggle.
Yeah, it makes complete sense, and it's certainly something that the kind of initiative of designers and architects to kind of work with craftsmen is driven by this kind of, often it seems, this kind of passion and sort of commitment to those kind of, like Martina was saying, a way of life, a way of being. But Florence has very helpfully added to the chat that mentioning how the British Council runs a program in Southeast Asia called Crafting Futures, where there's a huge amount of advocacy done through that, and she's happy to share any information about that as needed. And of course, the British Council is, one of those advocacy groups of the kind of power of knowledge that's contained within craft. And it's worth mentioning the videos on the About Making series do include, as Martina was saying, this documentation of traditional craft practices, including kind of the short videos of the joinery techniques used in the traditional Malay housing that we've been referring to. But I suppose I don't know if there's anybody else who's got a question. We're kind of slightly over our time, so maybe it could be a closing question, but it is a very UK dependent question that I'll ask Martina, and that's the kind of the role of tradition in the UK, in the sense of what is what is the UK's tradition, I suppose, when it comes to craftsmanship that can be learnt from. Where is, I suppose, the wisdom that we need to be sensitive to within the UK, in your view?
I think it's everywhere. I think it's absolutely all around. I mean, when we think back to Ruskin and sort of building roads and so on, and trying to really promote the idea of looking and paying attention at what the origin of things are. We've got lots of traditions in the UK, in every single craft sphere, in every discipline. But how we, I think the best way that I would like to see is to change the language around the word tradition, because as I was trying to show at the end of my presentation, it's always in flux. It's a contingent word. It's not a fixed. When you say the word tradition, most people think it's a fixed past thing. It borders on a nostalgic, ring-fenced vision. But it's actually always being remade, rethought, recontextualized in each generation. And I think that's where we need to change the language and make it very dynamic, so that I can remember Peter Dormer writing books, The New Tradition in Jewelry, The New Tradition in ceramics. We need to, the UK is absolutely as full of traditions, but we need to reposition our thinking that it is a dynamic word, and it is always changing. It has its nuanced, subtle evolutions, and they marry with so-called avant-garde or contemporary practice.
Absolutely. And just on the chat here, we've got a contribution from Anne Thorne, who's has stated here, at the Art Workers Guild, which is Art Workers Guild is here in London, we've been running a series of workshops where craftspeople such as embroiders, masons, leather workers show their skills for a day and get participants involved. This is what we call thinking with our hands. And the workshops are known as useful parallels and have been named specifically as architects, surgeons, computer scientists, to share ideas and bring the importance of crafts to the fore. So yeah, there is a lot of ability to share, to learn, to kind of make the most of the skills that are in existence, as you say, Martina, all around us. So yeah, thank you very much for that, Anne, and also Florence, for kind of your representations of the bodies that you're associated with. But I'm aware that we're coming to the end of today. These dialogues were always designed to be quite kind of like lunchtime lectures in the UK, and evening kind of end of day reflections in Malaysia. So we'll keep it kind of close to time, and hope that we've been able to incite your interest, develop this thinking, and to sort of see the dynamism of tradition, as Martina was saying, and value of considering the craftsmanship and the techniques involved in our thinking about design and craft and art more broadly, and of also ways of life. I think I've just encourage everyone to go to the About Making website, where the 6 episodes are now uploaded. I don't know if Eleena wants to come in at any moment to add anything, but we've got 2 more dialogues, one on the 28th of March and one on the 4th of April at the same time. So please look out on your emails for information through the Eventbrite and sign up information through Eventbrite so you can join those sessions. And on the theme of the one on the 28th is called Material. We have Rodrigo Garcia Gonzalez of Notpla talking, a confirmed speaker. And then on the 4th of March, the theme is Cultural Exchange, where the 121 Collective and Shao Architects will be speaking, and they're in the videos that are on the website that Christoph has helpfully put on the chat. So, and yes, Christoph has just reminded me that the interview with Amin Taha, London-based architect, is going to go live very, very soon. Yeah, just a series of announcements. Eleena, is there anything else that you want to add before finishing?
No, I have nothing more to say except to say thank you so much to the speakers. It's such a wonderful conversation, so useful for us here. And we need a workers' guild here, I think, definitely. And thank you to all who tuned in to listen as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. You're welcome, Anna.